Welcome to level 10 out of 31 levels of the 613 degrees or rungs on Jacob's ladder. Let's begin with making a parapet for the roof. A parapet is a wall on one's roof to prevent a person from falling off of their house. Metaphorically, when a person stands on the roof, this means they are standing from an upper level of reality or an upper level of perception. To make a parapet on one's roof is to prevent a person from falling and losing this great perception achieved. By familiarizing oneself with God's qualities and His ways, one can now begin to perceive the totality of reality and the nature of life. When they perceive the totality of reality, they eliminate their limited, narrow-minded perception of reality where they only perceive themselves as the center of the world, egoistically and selfishly. Now one's perception is altruistic and selfless, and a different perception is created out of not just thinking of themselves, but others as well. Once this perception of a heightened reality is perceived, in order to maintain this perception, one can remind oneself of God's qualities, and this prevents a person from falling back to a limited perception of reality of only worrying about themselves. Another way of maintaining the parapet on the roof and avoid falling is to break altars and pillars of egoism and selfishness. The altar is the seat of thought, so it is important to have thoughts of altruism and selflessness on the altar or on the mind. A pillar is something that supports a structure. An example of pillars are the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins are greed, wrath, pride, lust, gluttony, sloth, and envy. These are the pillars of egoism and selfishness. It is important to destroy or rid these 7 sins. It is even more important to not leave any trace and utterly and completely destroy them. The way we completely destroy them is to practice moderation, which destroys greed, patience, which destroys wrath, humility, which destroys pride, love, which destroys lust, abstinence, which destroys gluttony, effort, which destroys sloth, and praise, which destroys envy. Once we have attained these 7 lively virtues, we have officially, utterly destroyed the 7 deadly sins or pillars of egoism and selfishness. 2 other pillars of negativity are doubt and uncertainty. It is important to remember causality, that everything happens for a reason, and that everything is part of God's plan, which allows for certainty and faith that God is good. So it is important to blot out and remove doubt and uncertainty, and remember the dangers of doubt and uncertainty. With doubt and uncertainty comes fear, anxiety, paranoia, and many other negative effects. It is a struggle to maintain certainty. However, it is a good quality to be a fighter, to contend and endure with one's faith and certainty in life. It is important to fight mentally for positivity and avoid negativity. This leads to inner peace. It is good to approach peace, speak of peace, and proclaim peace. Once we conquer certainty and faith, we attain peace of mind. First, we approach or move towards peace and certainty. Then we manifest peace of mind and finally proclaim and be aware of when we finally reach peace of mind. It is not easy, but once a person eliminates doubt and uncertainty, peace of mind is a very rewarding state of consciousness that should be declared and celebrated once attained. If one sins unintentionally and is troubled by the sin, causing a mild form of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, they can practice removing the traumatic experience by remembering the concept of causality, where everything happens for a reason. So there was a reason behind the accidental transgression, and once the reason is discovered, then the sin can be covered up and put away. This is what's called having a paddle, digging with a paddle, and covering with a paddle. A paddle is metaphorically used to cover up an accidental or unintentional transgression. It is good to not dwell on the past because it can prevent one from living a positive future. Another rung on the ladder is to uphold the poor. As previously mentioned, the poor is a metaphor for depression within a person's life. So to uphold the poor metaphorically means to support depression and provide oneself with everything necessary in order to fight depression and uphold one's spirits. It is good to furnish the Hebrew. The Hebrew is a metaphor for a slave. A slave is one who is enslaved to egoism and selfishness. So to furnish the Hebrew means to gradually release oneself from spiritual slavery and slowly moving away from egoism and selfishness. It is also important to lend money to the poor. Spiritual money is a metaphor for a person's mood, wellness, or state of happiness. When a person lends money to the poor, they are making themselves happy and avoiding depression by cheering one up with pleasurable and enjoyable activities. Sometimes it is necessary to experience great excitation and pleasure in order to avoid depression. This selfish pleasure experience is called lending money to the poor. It is important to lend money with interest. This means to experience selfish pleasures, but one day pay back the pleasure by experiencing altruistic joy. Lending with interest is to plan on doing more virtues than sins in the future, paying off the interest. It is also good to restore the poor man's pledge. This means to temporarily experience selfish pleasures to avoid depression, but pledge to experience altruistic joys from loving others and God in the future, which is a pledge to God. Last, it is important to give higher in the same day. This means if a person has an opportunity and is willing to be altruistic and selfless, they should not procrastinate and delay this opportunity, but hire themselves that day and perform the good deeds that are given to them.